dementia, connecting our lives to help us survive. So we spend our time to the fullest we can. We're seeing our lives have...
Hi, welcome to Professional Insights, created by Dementia Action Alliance. I'm proud to be your host, Laurie Scher. During our Professional Insights podcast, we have educational conversations with professionals in the dementia community to provide answers and support to people living with dementia and care partners. My guest today is Kim McRae. Our topic is delusions, hallucinations, paranoia, and delirium. What's the difference, and why does it matter to me in my dementia journey? Kim McRae is a consultant, a speaker, educator, and an FCTA, which is Family Caregiver Turned Advocate. She has been involved in the national culture change movement since 2006 and co-founded the Cultural Change Network of Georgia in 2008. Kim is also an educator and mentor for the Eden Alternative. She has 12 years of history as a family caregiver and a consumer of aging services and long-term care. Kim was a member of the founding board for the Dementia Action Alliance. She's a recipient of the Eden Alternative Empowered Innovator Award and the Southern Gerontology Society Applied Gerontologist Award. Wow, Kim, that's a lot.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be with you, and I have a really special place in my heart for DAA.
Oh, and we for you. That's why it's such a thrill to have you here with us. And now our topic. Wow, I mean, this is such a lot of terminology. Just saying them all is a lot of terminology there. So let me just ask you, what is the difference between delusions, hallucinations, paranoia, and delirium? And as I said in the introduction, why do I care in my dementia journey? What's it to me?
Well, I've put together, Lori, a PowerPoint presentation, actually, so that we can really look at the words and kind of study them and then think about some of the things that might be helpful for us to know and for you all to know as you're trying to navigate your journey with dementia.
Awesome, let's go.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Hold on a second. And just as we're doing this, I'll let you all know that my mother had Lewy body dementia. So I had a lot of experience with Lewy body dementia. So we're going to talk about brain changes and what are the things that cause hallucinations and delusions and paranoia and delirium. So first of all, we're just going to define and talk about delirium. Now, that is when something comes across very suddenly. It's sudden and acute, and it's when somebody is all of a sudden very confused. And this can happen when you start a new medication, if people are dehydrated, if they have an infection. A lot of times when somebody suddenly starts having delirium, one of the first things we think about is if it's a UTI, for example. It could be that if you started a new medication, that could cause it, as I said. And then it's important to know that older people with dementia are more likely to develop delirium in the hospital. And that's what that article said, but I don't think it's just older people. I think people with dementia in general can be prone to developing delirium in the hospital. And that's something that we need to know about so that we can try and be proactive. So when we're in the hospital, it's a new place. There's no routine. There are a lot of odd sounds. You can't sleep well. So if you know that you have to go to the hospital, you can talk to your doctor ahead of time to try and talk about ways that you can prevent delirium from happening. So that's what that is. Now, hallucinations are when people have a false, I'm sorry, I apologize for that. A false perception of objects or events that are sensory in nature. So think about the five senses. People can see things and hear things and feel things and sometimes even taste things that aren't really there. And sometimes people, you might have heard, see insects crawling or see dust or bugs crawling on their hands or near people. Those are hallucinations. My mom with Lewy body dementia, and a lot of people with Lewy body dementia, you might hear that they see animals and children, and she did. And some of you all might be experiencing that or have experienced that as well. So those
A lot of
are,
us a lot of us have reported that we smell things. We smell a fire when it doesn't exist. Is that a hallucination as well?
it can be, Lori, it can be a hallucination. And who knew that there could be smell and taste hallucinations? Now, if we smell things that smell like fires, we need to check, of course, for safety, but it's possible that it could be a hallucination. So just knowing that, I think, is really helpful for all of us. And then delusions are when we have a false idea or belief. And sometimes it's when we are misinterpreting a situation. And some of the things that you might have heard of are people stealing or taking your pocketbook or your money, or that the police are following you. And sometimes you can become paranoid, which is part of this, when you kind of get hyper focused on something happening. And that's paranoid, when you're just thinking that stuff's always happening. Now, some of the things, I'll give an example. When people are in an assisted living, for example, or anywhere, and when family or care partners are giving medicine and they hide it and they grind it up and put it in applesauce, for example, and it makes applesauce or the pudding taste funny. And when somebody living with dementia says they're trying to poison me, it's logical when you really step back and think about that it's not, you would think somebody was trying to poison you if if your applesauce and your pudding and your food tastes funny. So you become paranoid about that. And there are some reasons why, when you dig into it, that can explain where that paranoia might have come from. And I already mentioned this before, but it's really important to know that some of the drugs, the antipsychotics and psychotropic medicine, if it's used incorrectly or misused, it can cause hallucinations and delusions. And sometimes, if your medicines are changing and overlapping, like we mentioned, so just being aware of that, if you notice that you're having hallucinations and delusions, learning to check, has my medicine changed? And sharing this kind of information with your family, friend, care partners, and even for yourself. Knowing this can help you think through these things and try and navigate them, and try and get them figured out. We know that different parts of the brain control different parts and functions of the body. We know that. And we also know that so many of the dementias are misdiagnosed and underdiagnosed. And we also know that many, many people have mixed dementia. So everybody experiences dementia in their own unique way. But I think something that's really interesting is to think about these. There are 7 A's that come with dementia. And instead of trying to guess, it's this part of the brain doing this kind of thing, we know that things are going on in the brain, in different parts of the brain, that are causing things to happen. And these 7 A's help us kind of categorize some of these things that might be caused by particular parts of the brain. So we've all heard about memory loss with Alzheimer's and dementia. It's called amnesia. That's the A for it. Where we're having substantial difficulty with learning and retaining information. But not everybody with dementia has memory loss. Not all types of dementia have short-term memory loss, but that's one of the areas. And then apathy. We've talked about, I'm sure you all have talked a lot about apathy, when you just kind of lose interest in things. And some of that is caused by what's happening in your brain. And knowing that is helpful. And then apraxia, when the parts of your brain that control movement and being able to regulate movement and affect loss of motor skills, that affect what you're trying to do physically, that is apraxia. And then there's anosognosia, and I think y'all pronounce it differently, Lori. There are a lot of different ways to pronounce it, but you all have talked before about an inability to recognize when something's wrong, or not really recognizing if something's different or wrong or off. And then there's aphasia. And aphasia is when there is a problem with language, the loss of language, and not being able to find the right word, or not being able to speak and say and understand what we read and write. And all of these things that we're talking about, if we're having these things going on in our brains, they could be part of what is causing us to have hallucinations and delusions. Because if I'm not understanding the words correctly, or if what I'm reading I'm not understanding correctly, it can drive me to have some false beliefs and some paranoia, for example. Another one is altered perceptions. And this really gets more into hallucinations and delusions and paranoia. It's when our senses are, when we misinterpret things. And it could be depth perception, and it could be different types of interpreting the senses, like we talked about earlier with the five senses, including smell. And I'm scared I'll say it wrong. Agnosia. Agnosia. You all pop in if I'm saying it wrong. This is directly talking about the senses, not recognizing things through sight and sound and touch. And when we're not able to process these correctly, and if what we're seeing, if we're not understanding what we're seeing or hearing, that kind of thing can cause us to have hallucinations and delusions. So let's go back and just refresh on the definitions. Hallucinations are when we have a false perception of objects and events. So we talked about that. Delusions, we talked about that when we have a false idea or belief, when we're misinterpreting a situation. And everybody is going to have their own experience. Not everybody's going to have hallucinations and delusions. They can all show up differently with each of us. And an example my mom had, she was seeing, I had a stuffed Ernie, and he was sitting in the bar stool in the kitchen. And with her dementia, she leaned over to me with her Louis body. She was having a hallucination, a delusion. She said, "Who is that man?" So in her mind, she was seeing him as a man. And another time, when everybody was watching Katrina, when it was happening, she really thought that there was a flood in our house. So what we have on television, for example, can influence and cause us to have hallucinations, delusions, things that aren't real. So just by being aware of these possible changes, it helps you all be able to hopefully better hone in on some things and ask some questions and look for symptoms that you might want to tell to family and friend and care partners and doctors, and make sure that they know these things. And we need to just make sure that we teach everybody that we need everybody to understand not to blame you when you are having hallucinations and delusions, and to first seek to understand what's going on with you. You might be scared when this is happening or mad, depending on what it is. And we need to know that and realize that we don't want people to be scared. We don't want people to blame you for what's happening, and we don't want people to argue with you. And it really is best for all of us to talk about what we're feeling and be open and talk about it together and lay it out on the table. And that really, I think, helps if you're not scared to talk about it.
Mhm. Absolutely. Thank you, Kim. Thank you for sharing this. Turn
You're
down.
welcome.
Um, and I want to thank you for being here. Let's turn off the slides a minute there, Kim.
Okay, let me stop sharing.
But I really want to thank you because these terminologies are very difficult to understand, and you've broken it down for us, and we so much appreciate that. So,
You're
and
so welcome.
forward to you being in our discussion to research that even more.
Okay.
And Dementia Action Alliance is committed to enhancing lives, connecting people, and increasing understanding. I'd like to thank you, all of our viewers, for joining DAA for our Professional Insights podcast. More podcasts and valuable resources are available at daanow.org. You can continue these podcasts and other programs that enhance the lives of dementia community with a donation at daanow.org/donate. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did, and have a fabulous day.
Thank you so much, Lori. It was a pleasure to be with you.
How people
Thank you,
exchange,
Kim.
so we live.